Hello everyone, my name's Tom and I've just thought I'd put together a quick tutorial this afternoon. I've got a nice cold Coke Zero. I've been working on a few things in Unity and in After Effects to create a really nice effect for a health globe like you'd see in Diablo or in World of Warcraft or several other sort of RPG action style games. So quickly, in this tutorial we're going to use After Effects, Photoshop, Unity and another program called Texture Packer GUI to create something that looks a little bit like this. So you see I've got a health globe, you can regenerate it there and you get hit. Now this is all being controlled by a very simple script that we'll get into at the end and is created by a number of different elements. Those elements are, if we look, this is sort of what we started to look at from Diablo. We have lots of other, they're pretty common in games. So we've got Health and Minor. This is Diablo 2. This is Diablo 3 with the arcane power. I think it's Rift Quest or something like that. Just different GUIs, and it's pretty common for the action RPG sort of hack and slash genre. It's made up of a number of elements that I use to sort of create the one that I've got there now. So you've got the bright light across the top, you've got the animated internals there, and you've got the glass and the globe. And you can use it to create pretty much any style of fluid or anything inside there. So I've got the mana there, and with a few changes I'm sure you could figure out how to make it look like the arcane power there as well. But to start with, we're going to use the tools at hand to create this simple health orb that you can then place into your game, and it's just going to be a basic tutorial to allow you to be able to do that and to build on it. It's not going to be anything too in-depth. It's going to be something that you can build on. Anyway, to start, we're going to go into After Effects. We've got a new project here, and we're going to go Comp, New Comp. We want this comp to be 200 by 200, 24 frames per second and a duration of 5 seconds. And this comp will be called Health Orb. So got a 200 by 200 comp there. First thing I want to do is go Layer, New, Solid. And we'll call it Clouds. And I've actually done something wrong there, because we'll call it Clouds, but we want to make it 600 by 600 pixels. That's probably something you'll pick up a bit in my tutorial here, is that I will make a whole bunch of mistakes. Then the first thing we want to put is to get a CC sphere from our effects and previews and just drag that on. The radius we want to be just under 100, so something like 98 gives us a few pixels on either side. And for the shading, we want to get our ambient up to 100, our diffuse down to 0, and our specular down to 0. And all that does is gives us no lighting information on the sphere whatsoever. What this is going to do is it's going to make all the animations and the cloudiness and the inside appear that it's moving around inside a spherical object like an orb, a glass orb. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to layer, pre-compose, and we're going to leave all the attributes in Health Orb, and we'll call this Clouds and go in. As we head in, we've got Clouds. We're going to rename this to Base Clouds, and again we're going to pre-compose that so that we get it into a new composition. Going to rename this to Background, and the first effect we're going to put this one on is a fractal noise. So I'll drag that on there. First thing we want to do is change a fractal type. My favourite at the moment is Dynamic Progressive, because it gives that nice cloudy look to it. We're going to bring the contrast down, because we don't want the contrast of the background layer to be too much. And the brightness, you can have it dark or light, depending on how many layers you're going to do. We're going to use only 2 layers, so I'll bring it up to something, a medium value there. if we come down here, we go to the evolution options. We want to make sure we click cycle evolution. We can do it down here in the timeline as well. But you'll see in a second, or right now actually, because I'll show you what we can do with the fractal noise to animate it. So if we come down, we've got evolution options. The cycle evolution is on. We click here, set a keyframe, and come all the way across here. We can put that to 1 times, and you see nothing changes because it's just gone and looped the evolution around 1 time. If we drag that to 1 frame past the end of our timeline there, you can see that if we then pre-render all that out, that is going to loop indefinitely, which makes quite a nice, cool sort of effect. Now, one thing that I've noticed is because it's spinning 360 around a globe eventually, is you don't see a whole bunch of this evolution on the background layer. Now, you can leave it like that, that's fine, but something I'm going to try just with this one is we come and select this one over here. We'll drag us somewhere where we can grab it. I'm actually going to put it 2 times around in the evolution. That way we just get, you're never going to see the same evolution twice because it goes 360 around the sphere, and it just sort of increases that rate of evolution, which makes it look a bit more dynamic inside the glass sphere. So you can see that's looking quite good. Next thing we want to do is we come back to our clouds comp, and we're going to put an offset. And we're going to drag that on. The reason we put this into its own composition is that now the offset will loop itself around. So if we go to Effects, Offset, Shift Center 2, and we'll set a keyframe to start it there. We'll go all the way to the end, and we want it to move a total of 600 in both the vertical and the horizontal. So add that to the 300, which is the center position of it there. We get 900. So you can see that's moved that over there, and 900. If you've done that correctly, you'll see that it actually hasn't moved at all because the offset has looped it completely around. Again, we'll drag this to 1 frame past the end of the comp, and we'll pre-render that. And as you can see, it just floats around like it's moving. The seams are obviously glaringly obvious at the moment, but that's something we're going to take care of very, very shortly. But if we just go into the health orb now, and we can get a pretty good look of initially what it's going to look like, and that's looking quite cool. So we'll head into the base clouds here now. We'll close all that up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a whole bunch of layers and mask them onto the top layer to ensure that we don't get any seams. The way we do that is we'll take this background layer and we'll duplicate it, which is just Control D. We're then going to head into this background too, and if I'm talking a bit loud into the mic there, I do apologise. I'll make sure that I'm not peaking at all. We'll rename this to Sides, and we're going to pre-compose that again. So layer pre-compose. Important now is that we move all the attributes into the new composition. That'll just bring the fractal noise into the new comp with us. Open up that sides, and we want to put the offset filter again, but this time we want to only move it 300. So we're going to move it to a total of 6, and you can see that puts that seam right in the middle, but the offset has made sure that on either side it's actually moves seamlessly. We're then going to come up here to the fractal noise. We'll go to the evolution options, and we're going to change the random seed to 1. All that does is it gives it a different seed than the background, so that when we mask it out, it doesn't look like it's repeating itself over a number of times. We'll come back to the base clouds, and we'll create a mask. And we're just going to mask the sides, left side and the right side, and then I'm going to feather that out. Now, I know just because I've done it a couple times now, a good feathering amount is about 70 to 80, so we'll do about 73 there. And if you look, you notice that we have some clouds. You can't see where the mask is, and if we go into our clouds that has the offset animated, you can see that it is actually now seamless, which is looking really good. We've got the vertical seam. That's one more layer we have to make. If we go into the base clouds, we'll get our background again, duplicate it, drag it to the top, and we'll rename this top bottom. Again, we're going to pre-compose, move the attributes, and put another offset. This time we're going to offset the vertical by 300, so that makes it 600 total. And again, with the evolution options here, random seed, we'll move that to 1. Come back to our base clouds, and we'll mask the top and the bottom and feather that out. If I'm moving a bit quickly, I apologise, but there's a lot of content in this tutorial, and you can always just pause, slow it down, and check things out again. That's how good way to learn. So again, you see no obvious seams there, and if we head into our clouds, we've got a very small seam, and that's actually at the corners. So one more layer is going to fix that for us. So go back to our base clouds, get our background layer again, duplicate it, drag it to the top, and we'll rename this corners layer precompose corners, and we'll move into a new comp. Once we get in there, add the offset one more time, and this one we're going to offset 300 in both the horizontal and the vertical. Head back to our base clouds, and we just want to grab the corners. It's not a precise or exact art here. You just need to make sure that you get enough so that when you feather it, it's not going to bleed over the edge. And so now, you can see we don't have any obvious seams on this. Everything is moving the way that it should. And if we go to clouds now, you can see that there are no seams whatsoever. If we then go to the health orb, we can see that that's going to rotate itself around. There's some good dynamic movement of the cloud as well as the translation around the globe, and having it with the CC sphere there makes it look like it's traveling around something inside a glass orb or something. So that's the basics of how all these effects are created. If you want to change the direction or the movement and all that sort of stuff, you can do that. You can make it go vertical, you can make it spin the other way, you can even have layers that counter oppose. Alright, what we want to do now is we want to create a top layer that has a bit more contrast, but it'll move a little bit differently, a little bit quicker, and it just creates a bit of depth inside the globe. So I'm going to create a new solid, 600 by 600. I'm going to rename this to top clouds. And depending on how much time you want to spend on it, you can pretty much create 5, 6, 7 layers and create any complexity, and you can change the way they move and the directions and all that sort of stuff. But we're going to layer, precompose, and we're going to leave the attributes in cloud, and we'll go to top clouds, and we'll create a fractal noise. I like dynamic twist because it just is a bit different than the dynamic progressive. We want to turn the contrast well and truly up and bring the brightness down. That way we just get some highlights. We're going to screen this over the top of the background layer, and that'll allow us, the black will then be masked out basically. Come down to the white solid here, which we can rename background, fractal noise, and make sure we get the evolution options to cycle evolution on. Add a keyframe, and again we'll use 2 rotations. That way you see some good movement as it comes around. And if we pre-render that, you can see we've got some good evolution. Of course, we're going to have those same problems if we come back here to base, to clouds. If we put the offset onto this, also we'll change the blending mode here to screen, so it just adds white stuff on top. And if we come down to the effects offset, what we'll do is we'll put a keyframe there, come to the last one. We want to shift our center to, and I want it to go around twice and go down once. So I need to add 1200 to 300, which makes it 1500 if we do this right. You can see it hasn't changed at all up here, and we'll change this one just to 900. So it goes around twice and goes down once. Move that to the end of the frame there, and you can see it just adds a little bit of highlighting on top, and it moves at a different speed. We still have those problems with the seams. We're going to get rid of them in a second. So we'll come to top clouds, and we've got the background there. We'll duplicate that, rename this sides, and we're going to go through the exact same process that we did for the background ones. So there, offset, change this to 600, and make sure that the evolution options will go random seed 1. We'll come back down to top clouds, and we're going to just mask out the edges. Nice feather. Duplicate this one again, drag it to the top. I'm just going to Shift Control C, which is the hotkey for pre-compose. Get in there, add that offset filter again, this time to the second one. Evolution options, I want random seed 1. Come back to there and mask out the top and the bottom. And I've just noticed that the mask on the right hand side of the top bottom one is not feathered at all, so I'll just feather that one out as well. And finally rename this one corners. Last offset, shift center to 600. Oops, no. I want to go into the composition first before I add the offset. 600 by 600 and evolution options to 1. And you can muck around, of course, with all the fractal noise to get different effects. You don't necessarily have to use fractal noise. I've just found it's a really good way of generating that cloud-like effect and also having it loop without too much of a problem, and having it seamless by completing this. Grab those masks and we'll feather them out. So we need to force something. So now if we pre-render all that, that's the wrong way. That's not what I want to do. You can see we've got them, and there's no obvious seams, and everything is sort of moving in an interesting way. So if we then come out to our health orb, that's screened on top. You can see that's moving a bit quicker. And that creates quite an interesting look. It's all moving a bit quickly, but you can change the speed, the frames per second. It just changes the size of the sprite sheet at the end. Anyway, that's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to add a new adjustment layer. And this will get the color. So this can change it to blue, red, slightly yellow, white, contrast, that sort of thing. Effects, color correction, curves. Bring the green down. We'll make it a life orb, so we'll make it red. Bring that down. Maybe bring the red up a bit at the bottom here. And we'll add some nice dark contrast there. If we hit 0 now, you can see, yep, that's actually a pretty cool looking health globe. So, happy with that. We'll save our project. We'll make a new folder here, and we'll call it tutorial complete. And we'll just save this as health orb. We'll then export it, add to render queue. Settings we want here is we want to select a PNG sequence and RGB and alpha, just allows an alpha background image. Hit OK there, and we'll output to, we'll add a new folder called sprites, and it'll just be health orb output. And then hit render, and it'll render out our frames into a sequence of PNGs. And so if we now look into our tutorial complete and sprites, we've got all our sprites there rendered out nicely for us. So that's pretty much all we're going to use After Effects for now. That was pretty quick and dirty, and like I said, you can add more layers, you can do more effects, you can change the fractal noise, you can add some warp displacements, things like that, to make some really interesting effects for different types of orbs. I just wanted to give you the base on what we sort of can work with now. So, next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up Unity 3D. So, open up the desktop app, and we're going to create a new project. We'll call this Health Orb. And we'll go into Globe Tutorial, we'll create a new folder and call it Unity. We'll make it a 3D project. It doesn't really matter, it's only going to be the globe, depending on whether you've got a 2D or 3D game that you're using it for, and we'll create the project. Alright, so now that that's opened up, we've got a new Unity project. The first thing we're going to want to do is import something from the asset store. So what we're going to use is called Texture Packer GUI, but what it does is it has a Unity plugin that we can download, which allows us to import the textures, or the sprite sheet, that we have generated with this program, and it figures out which ones are which and puts them in the right order so that you have a nice animated globe. So click on this. I've already downloaded it, but you downloaded it and then import it into your project. So decompress, make sure we import it all. And there we are. Alright, so now that we've imported that package into Unity, we're going to come to Texture Packer GUI, which I think you can get from texturepacker.com or texturepacker.gui.com or something like that, and we will use the free version. It does have some small limitations, but that's not a big deal because we can fix them pretty easily in Photoshop. I do suggest you do go and buy this if you don't want to have to do that. It is a really handy program to have. All we're going to do now is we're going to grab all our sprites. I've got this over on my left hand screen here. Just click and drag all 20 sprites that we've just generated in After Effects and drop them in. We want to select the max size, so if you've got small sprites, obviously it'll fit on a smaller thing, and we want to trim, and we want to go none. And so you see we've now got a nice orderly sprite sheet, and it knows the position of all this of every animation frame, and what it's going to do is when we save it, it's going to import it into Unity automatically. So what we want to do is we want a data format. We want Unity 2D sprite sheet, and we're going to go data file, and if we go to Globe Tutorial complete, Unity Health Orb assets, so we just want to save it in our assets folder for our Unity file. We're then going to save as Health Orb. And you see it's packing there now, and I'll be back when it finishes packing. As you can see there, it's finished packing. It'll do a lot quicker. The only thing I forgot is when I reselected the data format, it put its trim mode. Just make sure that's at none, so you get a nice square sheet. We then publish the sprite sheet. It'll do that. See, there's a few errors there. It's in light mode, and so some of the sprites is going to be coloured red in our sprite sheet. Again, not a problem. We can fix that up in Photoshop without too much of a problem. Hit OK there. We'll get out of that, and you'll see that once we load Unity up, it's going to import the Health Orb for us. What's really handy about this is once we import it, it's a sprite, and we want to make sure it's trilinear and true color, not compressed, and it's already selected itself as multiple. The other thing that it has done, because we've already imported the Texture GUI importer into our program, is it's already selected every single one of the Health Orb images and sliced it up into what it's supposed to be. So if you look down now, it's actually imported them all. And we'll make sure the max size is 4096. That way it won't be blurry like it was there. So if we look down, you can see that everything is working the way it should. However, if we look at this one, 114, it says please use a license to purchase. Please purchase a license to use Pro features. Now, yeah, I highly suggest you do go and buy a license because it is an excellent program, but because I'm trying to show you how to use this with the free one, what we'll do is we'll open this, we'll show it in Explorer, we're just going to open it with Photoshop. So we know that it's 114, so I'll just grab, again from my left hand screen, I've got Health Orb 114, I'm just going to drag it into my Photoshop file. That's not right. Just press enter, zoom in a bit, and just place it over that red. Make sure that you've got it quite right with the pixels, so down one looks pretty good to me. We'll select this back layer and we'll delete it so that we have no extra red bleeding over where we don't need it to be. And then layer merge visible, and we can save that. Close that, and as we come back into Unity, it'll reload, and we'll see that because you've just changed your source image, the sprite sheet is still cut up exactly the same. So when we have a look at all the individual sprites, we now no longer have that problem with the red one. Again, we can cut that out, and you see 14 is in the exact right place. We can cut that out if you purchase the full program. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the glass for the globe, basically. So I'm just going to open up one of these Health Orb images in Photoshop. Doesn't matter which one, and we're going to start by creating some highlights and things like that. Now, if we look at our Diablo glass for some inspiration, we see we've got a highlight there, and just some small sort of reflections from, say, a room or something like that. So we're just going to use this for a little bit of inspiration to have a look. But you can generate the glass any way that you feel like you need to. So you can go ahead and generate it in a 3D program such as 3D Studio Max, or render it out with V-Ray or something like that. You can get an image off online and add different masks and stuff to make it see-through. I'm just going to go quite simply and create it myself. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a completely white, and if it's looking off coloured because this is my new my second monitor, which I haven't set up the colour profile correctly for Photoshop, so I'm not sure if it's just because I'm viewing it on my monitor or if it's actually going to look like this in the video, but just take it as read that this yellow colour is actually white, and that's what will be displayed when we output it anyway. So I'm going to create a new layer. We'll just rotate it a little bit. We'll rasterize it. Rasterize the layer. We're going to give it a bit of a blur. So I'll just give it a Gaussian blur. We don't want it too much for this one. This one's just going to be a little bit. We'll duplicate that layer. We'll scale it up a little bit. And we'll give it a bit more of a blur. Add a bit more, maybe something like that. And then just to make it look a bit better, we'll put it down like that. So that's a nice highlight for the globe. And we can combine those two to the one layer. Move that to where we want. Another thing that we saw is some sort of reflections on the outside of the globe, so we'll just add those as well. I'll grab a new layer here. I'm just going to do that with the pen tool. So we'll say that there's one sort of on the outside, like, if we go like that, and then bring it back like this. I'm not going to teach you guys how to use the pen tool. There's plenty of Photoshop sort of tutorials online that you can follow. Just create something And this is just rough, very quick and dirty to try and to show you some of the sort of procedures that I go through. So that'll work. We'll turn the opacity right down. Probably turn the opacity of this one down a little bit as well. Doesn't need to be full up. We'll turn this one down to about 38. It'll work well. And we'll just grab, we'll rasterize it. Grab the eraser. I've got it big and soft, and I'll just sort of like erase the top and bottom a little bit. You could do a gradient overlay, but you know, what of it. Just to create a little bit more like there's a sort of a room or something going on. We'll just, I saw there was one a little bit like this. Just adding some layers. Doesn't need to be, this one's going to be really low opacity, something like 6 or 7 or 8. And again, if we rasterize it, we can just erase. We can make this bigger. So we just get the outside of the really softness. It just adds a little bit of sort of stuff. It's not going to be the best thing you've ever seen, I'm sure. Actually, move this a bit further around. We'll just follow the shape of the globe. About right. Just get rid of this long silly thing. Make it a bit of a point. Maybe bring the opacity of this one up a little bit. Rasterize it. And just erase. And maybe we'll just add one more up here. Cool. So that's looking pretty good. And the final thing we're going to do is we'll come to, I just searched for dirty glass and make sure I had marked for distribution with modification. I'll just copy that. Scale it down a bit. So that's about the size of the globe. And we'll just change the overlay mode, so I reckon something like something like hard light, but then we bring the opacity right down again. Just gives a little bit of extra dirtiness to the globe, I suppose. We'll take all these highlight layers and we're going to merge the visible. Oh, no, we're going to merge these. Just adds a little bit of glassiness. We can even bring that opacity down a little bit if you wanted. Just muck around with it, make sure that it's good. And then we're going to select and on this layer we're going to just delete delete the outside. So what we've got left is just the globe. Get rid of this and we'll save this as a PNG file, and we can save it directly in Unity Assets. Yeah, it's tutorial complete, that's where I want. Unity Health Orb Assets. And we'll just name this Glass Front. And then to make the back, I'm going to get rid of the highlight. And then I can merge those. And we're going to transform flip horizontal. And we're going to transform and flip vertical as well. And then I'm just going to save this so you can see that's sort of an overlay. It's a bit the opposite. And we're going to save as. I'm going to call this glass back. With all assets, got glass front, we'll call it glass back. Cool. And so that's what we've done there in Photoshop. If we come back into our Unity, you see we've got glass front and glass back. I want to make sure we import them as a sprite. Make sure they're true color and trilinear, and we'll apply that to both of them. Cool. And so we've got the glass front and the glass back for our orbs. So let's get into actually creating the health orb itself. Oh, sorry, before we do that, there's one last thing we want to do in Photoshop. So, get rid of that. I'll open this up. And what we want to do is we want to create a white, completely white, mask. No, I want it to pretty much completely cover the circle of the orb, with just a little bit of bleeding, because we just want to cut inside. Make sure the opacity is at 100. Edit, transform, and we'll just scale it a little bit. And so that mask is actually pretty much where we want it. So that's pretty good. We'll turn this one off, and we're just going to save that. Again, as a PNG, we'll save it in assets, and we'll just call this mask. Back into Unity, we've got the mask. Make sure we import it as a sprite, trilinear, and true color. Alright, so we've got basically our background images ready for creation in Unity. Alright, so now that we've done all our images to make the basic orb, we're going to create a new game object, UI, and a slider. So basically, it's going to be a slider that is our health, and so we'll go position 0, 0, just so it's in the middle, and we'll go 200 by 200 because that's the size of the images that we generated. We don't want it to be interactable. We don't want the transition to be anything, so we'll go none, and we want the fill direction to be bottom to top. Minimum value is 0, max value is 1, and that's fine too. If we then go to background, we want this source image to be glass back. And so if you look now, if we go to the slider and we'll bring the thing down, we've got the glass back image as our background image. We want to go to background here and put the anchors to be 0 and 1, and then 0 and 0. And you can see then that creates a complete circle there as well. One other thing that we do want to do with the canvas slider is add component, UI, mask, and then add component, UI, image. This image we want to have our mask, and then we can turn off show mask graphic there. And so that creates a mask around the outside, which is what everything is going to be filling in. So now that we have the background sorted, we're going to go to the fill area. We'll come here, we want to create the anchors to 0 and 1, And we want 0 and 0 for the stretch left and right, so you can see it's a full circle now. And the top and bottom, I want to put -15 and -15. And this is just going to make it so that when you have full health or empty health, you're not going to be able to see that glowing red line at the top that we're going to add a little bit later on. When we go to the fill, I want to bring the health orb into the source image and then add a component, miscellaneous animator. Once we have the animator there, we'll go Window Animation, and that'll bring up our animation window. All we need to do now is create a new clip, and we'll call this Health Globe, and we'll get the health orb, toggle down on all that, and you see all your images back here. Grab all of them. All you need to do is click and drag into the animation. Sample, we recorded at 24 frames per second, so we'll change that 24 frames per second, turn off recording, and close. What we should see now is when we play, we're going to have our slider animated with the background of our globe. If we head to our slider now, we can actually pull down the value a bit, and you'll see that it's moving up and down. However, it's stretching, which is again not what we want to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to the fill area. We'll go to the fill, we come down here, and we're going to go to image type, filled. The fill method vertical, and the fill origin bottom. That way, when we use the slider now, it's just going to go up and down. And so that's pretty good for the slider now at the moment. One more thing we can do is we can go a UI image, and position X and Y will be 0, 0, and it'll be 200 by 200, and all we're going to do is put the glass front onto the source image there. Sorry, I put that, it's a sprite 2D in UI. And so, yep, if we go to this image now, we want it to be the glass front. And you can see now we've got a globe that spins around, and we can go to our slider, because it's not interactable at the moment, and pull up and down. And we've got a globe that moves. Again, is it the greatest thing ever? No, but certainly there'll be lots to work on a little bit later on. Alright, next thing we're going to want to do is change that sort of handle image at the top, is what's going to be our glowing frothy stuff. So again, we're going to go into After Effects. I'm going to create a new project, make sure we've saved the health orb, comp, new comp, and we're going to use width 200, but the height we're going to move down to about 50. Saying something about passing a mask shape on the clipboard, so I'm not too worried about that. Alright, what we're going to do now is, after we've made that new comp, we're going to go Layer, New, Solid. We're going to make the height 50 and the width 200 pixels. We're going to select a colour. We're going to make it a nice bright red colour. Something like that should work well for us, I reckon. We'll then just grab the mask tool. We don't want it to be particularly thick, something like that. And then we're going to use a turbulent displace. Drag that on there. What we can do with the turbulent displace is we can make the size a bit lower, and the amount also a bit less. One thing again that you'll want to use here is in your evolution options, we'll hit cycle evolutions. We can then click on evolution as a stopwatch, come all the way to the end. We'll go one time around, move it to 1, and you can see there it animates itself on the top. I reckon we go layer settings, solid settings, and we'll actually change the colour a little bit, because I think it's not quite what we want. We want it to be a better red, something like that. what we're going to do now is effect, effect stylize, and we're going to put a glow to it. And that's just going to glow it on the outside. The amount, sorry, that's the wrong one. The amount here of the glow, go threshold, less or more, depending. And you can just make the effects. I reckon the glow radius there is pretty good. You don't want it to be clipping the edges, otherwise you're not going to get a nice, good image. Intensity, you can go change it just depending on what you want. But I reckon that looks pretty good as it is. If you go 0, you can see now we've got a nice glowing frothy bit at the top. Very easy. We'll go File, Export, Add to Render Queue, and again, we want it to be a PNG sequence with RGB plus alpha, and we'll output 2 sprites. We'll create a new folder, call it Froth, and we'll just put this as Froth. We'll render them out, and that's done. We'll get back into our texture packer, File, New Project, open up where our sprites are. I'm just going to again bring it over on this screen to make it a little bit easier for me. Grab all the froths, drag them in, and we've got 2048 by 1024, so a bit smaller, and we want to save it as Froth. Publish sprite sheet. That's done pretty quickly. Into Unity again. Let's see, it will have imported our Froth. I want it to be sprite, multiple, trilinear, true color, and apply. If we look down at our Froth, we can see that everything is working reasonably well. So I got 57. So just 57, so that's pretty good. Open this in Photoshop, and then we'll just grab our Froth 57. That's the wrong one, that's there, that's what we want. Drag it in. It's really disconcerting, this Photoshop, where the white actually turns up as a really yellow colour. I don't like it. And we can see that it stretches a little bit left and right, so I'm just going to edit transform scale. 1 pixel to the left, 1 pixel to the right, and we'll grab the layer below. And then layer, merge visible. We'll save that out. And then back into Unity, where it'll reload it. So now when we go to the handle, we can grab the source image and we'll create it, Froth. What we want to do is the handle slide area, we want to have top and bottom to be 0 and 0. Come back to handle, add component, miscellaneous animator, window, animation, grab all our source images from Froth. We've got to create an animation first, so Froth, grab them in and just drag them in. Again, 24 frames per second. And as we hit play now, we can go and have a look at the slider. You can see we've got the Froth at the top and the bottom there. Now I think I had some clipping on the After Effects file, which made that too big, and that's why it's jumping up and down as it is. So just make sure that when you do that mask and that blur that there's no clipping, but I'm pretty happy with that just for a tutorial. And again, mess around with that a bit to get it looking as nice as you want it to look. Now we'll get a little bit of scripting here so that we can have a look at how it will work sort of in game. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new C# script. We're going to call this globe test. Open that up in MonoDevelop. And we have it here. First thing we want to do is we make sure we've got Unity Engine .ui. So otherwise we're not going to be able to get the slider and all that sort of stuff. In the after the public class, we're going to add a few variables. So we're going to go public slider, and it's going to be a health slider just as a name of a variable. Next one, we're going to go add a float, and we're just going to call it refill speed. I'm making these public so that they're you can edit them as you need in the editor. If you're making it as a real game, you don't necessarily have to make them public. And then one more, and it's going to be a bool for refilling to make the globe refill. So what we're going to do is in our start, we're going to assign the health slider to the component of whatever game object we attach this to. In this case, it's going to be a slider. So we get that component, and we're good to go. So in the update, we're going to first write an if statement to see if the globe is refilling. If it is, we're going to then continually add fluid to it at the refill speed until it equals 1. So if refilling, then we'll go health slider dot value. I've misspelt that. Value equals health slider dot value plus refill speed times time dot delta time, which just basically makes it frame rate independent, and will make it nice and smooth. I've actually stuffed up the code a little bit here because what we want to do is we want to continually add this, so we're going to add it to a conditional clause. So we'll go health slider is less than 1, then perform this, and then add it to the health slider dot value. See, my typing is not very good, and I keep misspelling health. So if that's happening, we want it to stop happening. So if health slider dot value is equal to or greater than 1, we're going to go refilling equals false. So that's basically the code that will add health at a rate of our refill speed times delta time until it gets to 1 or over 1, which it never should, but it's just there for redundancy if the code changes at all. And then it turns refilling into false, which means it stops adding that stuff. Come now down to another if statement, and this one is going to get the input. So if input dot get mouse button down 0 for our left mouse click, what we're going to do is health slider dot value equals health. That's not right. Dot value minus 0.1f. Of course, you can add that as a variable as well. Then another if statement. If, and we're going to get an input, get mouse button down, and we're going to go 1 for our right click. And we're just going to simply set refilling to true. Now with all that code, we should be good to go. So we'll save that out. Oh. And yep, just an error there, just because I forgot to write value here. So if we build this out, the build is successful. Come back into our game, we've got our globe test. We'll drag that onto our slider. So the slider now has that script. We'll put the refill speed to something like 0.1 and we'll press play. You can see now if we click, it'll go down by 0.1 at a time, and then if we bring up, it'll refill. And if we change the speed of that refill speed, we can have it going down at a certain speed, and we can have it going up at a certain speed. And you see that now it doesn't change at the moment once it's hit 1, because it's not refilling anymore. Click down, right click, it starts to refill. So apart from creating the outside image or the GUI aspect, that's pretty much it from me. I hope you've really enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you've been able to sit through it and all my mistakes. And check back in a little while. We'll probably create some more Unity style tutorials. So wishing you all the best. Thanks for watching.